I'm Dr. Priya Nagraj, and I'm the CEO of Pune Knowledge Cluster. For those of you who are coming or attending our talk for the first time, we are a knowledge management and enabling organization established by the Office of the Principal Scientific Advisor to the Government of India. We are one among 7 clusters in the country located in Pune, and we work with a large variety of organizations, academias, NGOs, industry, civic bodies, experts, individual experts, to sort of leverage their strengths and conceptualize and implement projects that are of relevance to the community and city. We really believe in the power of outreach, and we are privileged to have the kind of network that we have built over the last 4 years. And we bring a lot of interesting talks, lectures, workshops, training programs to this network. And today's talk happens to be one amongst such in our large series of events and workshops and talks that we do. So we have Professor GANESH BAGLER, who is a professor at the Infosys Center for Artificial Intelligence. I request that during his talk, while he talks about computational gastronomy, he also tells us a little bit about the Infosys Center for Artificial Intelligence and also tells us what the center does. This talk will focus on the application of data-driven strategies for investigating gastronomic questions, which has actually created an all-new paradigm for studying food and cooking. About Professor GANESH himself, he aspired to be an astronomer. He's trained in physics, computer science, and computational biology. He has had an adventurous journey from astronomy to gastronomy, and he's known for his pioneer research in computational gastronomy. His detailed profile is there on our website as well as the poster of the talk, so I won't take up too much time from him. The way we will conduct this session is I request all of you to stay on mute. You can keep your cameras on if you wish. I'm sure Professor GANESH would like to see your faces when he speaks. And we will take your questions on chat. You can post your questions during his talk also. We will take them at the end. We'll have a moderated Q&A where we will allow you to unmute and ask your questions. So with that, I hand it over to Professor GANESH.
Thank you. Thank you, Priya, for that kind introduction. Let me get started with today's topic. And before that, I should also thank Pune Knowledge Cluster and specifically Gayatri Shirsagar for facilitating this talk. It's my pleasure to be spreading the excitement of this unique work that we do in computational gastronomy to each and everyone who is interested. I am associated with IIIT-Delhi and specifically within that, the Infosys Center for Artificial Intelligence, which specializes in the area of artificial intelligence and its application for a variety of topics, right from space sciences to ecology and other aspects of technology, and food included in that. Food and cooking is part of the story, which is what computational gastronomy deals with. So welcome. I'm assuming that most of you would not have a deep understanding of computer science, but at the same time would be aware of what, broadly speaking, computing refers to, what artificial intelligence, examples of artificial intelligence that you must have seen around you these days. And within that premise and context, I would like to provide you what an exposure to the research that we are doing in the area of computational gastronomy, both theoretical as well as applied topics that we have been working on in a manner which is accessible to you. And of course, towards the end of it, around 40 minutes after that, you'll be most welcome to pose your questions. And either you can open your mic and ask towards the end of it, or you can put it in the chat box so that I can answer your questions. So to begin with, I have been looking at food and cooking, but I must tell you very briefly, while Priya did mention in the introduction about what I am up to in life. As a teenager, I always aspired to be an astronomer. In fact, to this audience, which is listening to me under the auspices of PKC, Pune Knowledge Cluster, my roots of aspiration in astronomy were actually in Pune. I studied in University of Pune and did my master's thesis at IUCAA. And that is where I always wanted to be doing my research in astrophysics, which never happened incidentally. But this has been a long journey from astronomy to gastronomy. And having said that, let's jump into the topic of food and cooking and how two things which are so different from each other: computer science, data sciences, artificial intelligence, which seem rather deep and technical, whereas food and cooking, which are topics which are close to our heart, something which we experience on a day-to-day basis. And perhaps one cannot imagine a priori about how these two things can come together to create a science of its own, which we have labeled it as computational gastronomy, is what I'm going to explain to you. When we look at food and cooking, to us, they seem like trivial matters of daily experience. But at the same time, when you look at food deeply, one can wonder about why is it that what I'm eating is something which is available to me? Is that the reason that I'm eating? Or are there deeper reasons because of which we consume what we do consume on a day-to-day basis? Everything that we eat, a dish, has a long history of combining raw ingredients, processing them, and consuming it because it is delicious. And it has taken of the order of hundreds of years, if not longer than that, to arrive in its present form. So cultures have ended up creating this delicious capsules that we call them as recipes, and we practice on a day-to-day basis. Repetitiously, we cook them, eat them the way they have been presented to us by our ancestors. But at the same time, looks like that the ability of cooking has been very, very central to why we are the most powerful species on the earth, the Homo sapiens. It has been argued that cooking is one of the key factors that has been responsible for why we ended up developing disproportionately large brain sizes that we tend to have. In fact, this is the argument which has been given by Richard Wrangham in his book, Catching Fire: How Cooking Made Us Human. He says that, among other factors, the ability of our ancestors of cooking the food and thereby literally digesting the food outside the stomach, if you look at it deeply, is the ability which has eventually led us to increase our brain sizes. If it is not ironical, I would like to present to you that this cartoon, which kind of shows you retrograde evolution of after becoming a super species which has dominated the earth, seems like we are plagued with lifestyle disorders such as obesity, cardiovascular disorders, type 2 diabetes, and among others. And incidentally, food and the cooked food is something which is central in addition to other factors which are responsible for causing these diseases. So it seems that food is rather important, and at least from public health point of view, we need to look at food in a deeper fashion. And the other reason we should be thinking about food deeply is that something which is rather critical for civilization is food, the cooked food. And while Elon Musk is trying to take us to the Mars and create a civilization of its own there, one might wonder about why he's wanting to take us there. And having gone there, how are we going to survive and feed ourselves? Coming to Earth, we should also think about it that within 3 decades, we will have a population of around 10 billion. And how are we going to sustainably feed these 10 billion people is another matter of survival, and that's something we need to ponder upon and think deeply about it. And I, at least from a computational perspective, have been looking at it a problem through the lens of data. I've been looking at food in my lab along with my lab members as a blend of food, data, and computing. In a fancy manner, we may call it artificial intelligence and food combination, which incidentally it is. I'll be giving you an example of the same later on. But at the same time, at the heart of it, computational gastronomy is a blend of food, computation, and data science. That's what it does. And that is why this special talk on data science, we are trying to dwell upon food and cooking, which are, while at the same time very personal and subjective, are at the same time, our lab is trying to create an objective and data-driven science out of it. When you look at food, there are various aspects that are associated with it. One is that of the way we cook it through the traditional recipes that are passed on to us. Further, why and how we incorporate certain ingredients in our recipes, which are naturally available to us, predominantly because of their flavors, in addition to other factors which I'm not accounting for the moment, not to mention the nutritional value that they offer to us in terms of the macros and the micros, the calories, the fat, and the protein, and of course the micros in terms of vitamins and minerals. So nutritional aspect is another key factor to the jigsaw puzzle of the food. And then, of course, the long-term effects of food that we eat on our health by virtue of the kind of good and bad that the food imparts on our health is also another critical factor. And finally, last but not the least, while none of us would be directly interested in figuring out how is it that what we eat on a day-to-day basis might be affecting the earth and the climate, and how is it sustainable or not, food incidentally contributes to the 1/3 of the carbon footprint of human beings create. And therefore, sustainability and the carbon footprint of the food is a critical factor that we have been investigating in my lab for a while now. And then this is a broader picture that I have already described to you about food and its different dimensions. If you wish to look at it as a puzzle, then these are jigsaw pieces of the food puzzle, and they affect us at an individual level, at the level of communities, and as a civilization. Because quite clearly, if we want to survive on Earth and grow to a population of 10 billion or further, which is what is inevitable, seems like, we need to find ways of changing our food ecosystem in a manner that it is sustainable. Computational gastronomy, while I coined the term and our lab has been intensely working on it for the last 9 years, it has become an acceptable term which various people across the world in the laboratories, computer science laboratories, food laboratories, flavor laboratories have been pursuing it for last few years, and it's been a decade or so that this area has been growing by leaps and bounds. And I'll be presenting you a picture of what are the different use cases, examples, and various dimensions of computational gastronomy that the world has been looking at it for a while now. And within the premise of computational gastronomy is the vision of making food computable. And what do I mean by that? Well, it turns out that various aspects of our life have been dramatically changed by the introduction of data science and computing, which has again grown exponentially over the last few decades in terms of its computing power. And that is why we see the rise of artificial intelligence because the number of data sets and variety of data that we have been gathering from different aspects of life has grown exponentially along with the computing. And that's what has changed our life in a dramatic fashion, whether it is Google Maps or the way we network with other individuals or other aspects of life. Everything has changed dramatically. Question is, can food, something subjective and we consider deeply personal, can it be also made computable? Is the question that we have been asking, and that's a vision that I've been propagating. All of this actually started way back in 2015 when I was still at IIT Jodhpur, when we investigated the recipes from Indian subcontinent and looked at what is called as the food pairing phenomena, meaning given a dish, it has a certain ingredients in them, anywhere between 2 to 40, 50, any number of them. They are combined in a creative manner to create a delicious dish out of it. And the question that we were asking is that, are there principles, rules that are followed while creating dishes out of them? And this idea is referred to as food pairing phenomena. And incidentally, there was a standing hypothesis that ingredients that taste similar tend to go well with each other. And that had been shown to be true in the context of various Western cuisines. And what we did for the first ever time is to create a database of Indian recipes, their ingredients, and the flavor compounds which are found in these ingredients, further investigating the food pairing phenomena to show that Indian cuisines indeed have a very characteristic pairing patterns which are unique, very different from those of the Western recipes. And we named these phenomena as the contrasting food pairing. And the lens which we had used for investigating this is called as the culinary fingerprint, which basically looks at the pattern of ingredients that are found in the recipes, which are different in the case of India vis-a-vis the world cuisines. We also ended up showing in this paper that Indian recipes have a key ingredient category which is critically placed, and that turns out to be the spices. And I'm sure many of the faces are already glowing, thinking about, well, I know about it already. Yes, we knew intuitionally that spices are critical, and not by virtue of the quantity, but by virtue of placement in the recipes. And what we did is to break down the recipes into their constituent ingredients and further to their flavor molecules. And in a statistical, through a statistical analysis, we showed indeed spices and the placement of the spices in Indian recipes is rather unique and definitely distinct from the way the world uses spices when it uses. And this we ended up publishing, and that's when our lab got into the limelight, including being highlighted by the MIT Technology Review. This article was talked about much and was called as the emerging technology, an emerging technology. And I was wondering why it is being called as a technology, whereas what we were investigating was that of a discovery or a scientific phenomena that we were looking at in the Indian recipes. But very soon I realized that the very same investigation, the way of looking at food from a data-driven perspective, can lead to interesting applications and technology innovations. And that industry seeks a lot. And that is where we realize it becomes a technology rather than becoming a pure science question. Well, remember that no aspect of life can be converted into data science unless you have the data. Without having the GPS data and markers on the surface of the earth, we cannot make the maps computable. Only 2 to 3 decades back, roughly speaking, all the maps used to be on the papers. But we today are very used to using Google Maps from going from anywhere to anywhere. And this was possible because meticulous and detailed collection of data points that were done for Google Map creation, in addition to application of algorithms, such as finding the shortest path from point A to point B, which is what we inevitably end up using every time we use Google Maps. When it comes to food and cooking, incidentally, hardly any data was available at that point of time. Therefore, our lab took up this challenge of compiling databases of recipes, flavors, health association, nutritional profile, and others when it comes to food, while we were putting the foundation of computational gastronomy. And if you're wondering all this time, why am I showing the poster of a movie of which was based on this adventurous lady Tarla Dalal, then turns out that she was the person whose efforts we ended up using through the Tarla Dalal website for creating the first ever database of Indian recipes, which at that time was only 2,500 odd recipes that we had compiled, in addition to looking at their flavor compositions. Well, starting from what we had at that time to today, we have 118,000 or more number of recipes from across the globe, 26 regions and 74 countries from where we have compiled these recipes, and in a systematic fashion have structured it by decomposing the recipe into its ingredients, further the quantity, the units, the flavor molecules, nutrition profile, and others. And in this particular study, we had extended the culinary fingerprints to the world cuisines. And this was the first ever analysis of world over cuisines across the world and looking at what kind of patterns are imbibed in them. And this, incidentally, as a poetic justice, was presented in a conference, in an international computer science conference at Paris, the Mecca of gastronomy. And that's how the culinary fingerprints were exposed to the world through our lab's research. Another question that we asked, having collected such a deep data of recipes from across the globe, is that of how are cuisines related to each other? Now, many of you would have seen the world language tree about how languages are related to each other. For example, Telugu and Kannada are very much similar to each other in terms of their script. And in a big way, Devanagari scripts such as Hindi and Marathi are also close to each other. And by virtue of spoken languages also, people have found ways of finding similarities between the languages and created the world language tree, literally to peek into the past of the languages and to see how they are related to each other. In exactly similar manner, in our lab, we have looked at the relatedness of cuisines with each other. So by compiling the recipes of a given cuisine and other cuisines similarly, and creating what is called as a culinary fingerprint, in a computational manner, we have investigated the interrelatedness of the cuisines, how similar or dissimilar they are with each other, and thereby creating this first ever primitive, the tree of world cuisines, which allows us to look into the history of what might have happened and how, except other than the geographical proximity, other factors might have played role in creating various interesting relationship across the cuisines, which go beyond the geographical proximity and also reflect upon, for example, the colonial influences that have happened and other transfers that have happened over a period of time. And of course, it also makes us wonder about how cuisines of the future might look like. 30 years down the line, when 10 billion population is consuming the food, what would we be eating? Would cuisines be similar? Would they be more homogenized? Would there be more varieties of the cuisines? Will there be more ingredients that are getting incorporated into these cuisines? All of these are very, very interesting questions to ask. And as I said, without data, none of this can be called as a data science. And here is a snapshot of our lab-based resources. Majority of them are databases. On the left, you have a recipe database, flavor database. Then you have health associations of food ingredients available from scientific literature from PubMed and Medline, DietRx. And we also have recently compiled estimated carbon footprints of recipes. If I were to eat poha today or a paratha or a dhokla, what is the kind of an impact I'm leaving on the environment is in a way reflected in terms of its carbon footprint. And we have estimated that in the recent study, which is under review right now. And going beyond, the other thing that we have done is to build algorithms. Remember, as I said earlier, computation and computing plays a big role while using this data, asking interesting questions. And I'll be giving you a couple of examples of these algorithms and how we have used computing in the context of food and various dimensions of the food. Our lab, having worked on this domain, many of you who understand how science and research works would notice that it is not every day that a new scientific discipline is created. And this happens to be one such data science discipline, looking at food and cooking in a very intense fashion, thanks to the databases and algorithms that we have put together. And we and our lab today is considered the ground zero of computational gastronomy, where some of the most exciting questions in this domain are being asked. I don't know how many of you are aware of these magazines. The Food Innovation Quarterly is a France-based magazine which talks about various aspects of food, right from marketing to science. And this, it highlighted our research a few months back last year. Science Reporter is a CSIR-supported magazine, which on the cover of which we were recently last year, wherein the computational gastronomy was talked about in a detailed fashion, telling how food science is taking leaps by virtue of combination of computer science and food. I would like to present you a story of how one can ask some of the most deepest questions, regardless of which domain you are looking at it. And many of you are already aware of how AI, artificial intelligence, is making inroads in various aspects of our life. Until few decades back, it was thought that computers cannot think. In fact, it was an old question in 1955 that Alan Turing, considered to be the father of artificial intelligence, asked, "Can a machine think?" And well, it was the popular answer, at least 3 decades back, was that it cannot. And that is where the endeavor for looking at aspects of human creativity, human thinking, human cognition and consciousness started, and how computers can imitate and how imitation game can be played using computers. The whole journey started from there. And way back in 1998, it was shown that indeed computers can beat humans in the game of chess. Garry Kasparov was defeated by Deep Blue way back. And very recently, Go, a much more complex combinatorics X game, again, computers ended up beating the world champion from South Korea. And you might be thinking, while I'm giving these examples of games, that these are very trivial, combinatorial, and those requiring a lot of memory at which computers are very good. But then turns out that the recent forays, including ChatGPT and other large language models, as they are called, are making entry into the creative domains. And right from poetry, painting, music, they are making inroads and making it seemingly they are creating poetry, paintings, and to some extent the musical pieces, which can almost be tantamount to be called as human. And that is where we are asking, going beyond these domains where visual arts are being talked about, where writing ability is being talked about, or auditory capabilities are being talked. Can cooking, which is very complex, involves vision, taste, smell, and tactile sensations, in addition to other factors, can such a complex domain, can it be dealt through the lens of AI, is the question that we have been asking. Now, at this juncture, I would like to pose a question to you, and those of you who are who would like to pitch it can put it in the chat box. How many recipes do you think are there in the whole world? If I were to compile all of them, say for example, the Marathi recipes, the Tamil recipes, Punjabi, and going forward, if I were to go and create repositories of French, Italian, around a few 100,000, a lakh that is, would it be of the order of crores, or would it be a billion? What number are you anticipating we would come up with if we were to put together all the recipes that are traditionally cooked? So make a guess. In the meanwhile, I'll just take it forward while you are probably chiming in with your estimates. Most people tend to give these estimates, which are of the order of thousands, lakhs, maximum million, like Kalpesh Kothale is saying it's around a million. Well, turns out that compiled recipes, when you look at the data repositories that are available, we tend to have a number which is close to a million and tens of million maximum. In fact, the largest that is available today is the MIT 1 million recipes, and a couple of million is the number that you can possibly have. But then tell me, given the fact that there are so many ingredients that are naturally available to us, and we being omnivores, we should be able to combine these ingredients in a creative fashion to create potentially palatable, if not tasty recipes. If we were to do that, how many recipes are possible? Well, it turns out this number is humongously large, because the number of ingredients available at the least are of the order of a few thousand, and the number of ingredients that a given dish has is around 10. That's an average number, where it can range from anywhere from 2 to 100 plus, but well, 10 is the average number that we know from the statistics that we have already done in the lab. Well, with this, we come up with a number which is as large as around 10 to the power 30 number of recipes that we can have. And I know that many of you who are foodies, and that is why partially some of you are here, would be salivating, thinking, well, how many recipes can I actually cook out of these and enjoy these recipes? Well, that's a interesting thought to have. While at the same time, some of those of you who are very critical would be also thinking that it's one thing to come up with permutations and combinations of ingredients, and it's another thing to have some these recipes which are palatable and tasty, if not delicious, right? Well, that's right. Even if I were to identify recipes, islands of recipes, the galaxies within these universe full of recipe stars that we have, if we were to identify it, well, then that number also is humongously large incidentally. So the question that we started asking in my lab is that, is it possible for us to make computer think like a chef? Extending the question that Alan Turing asked, can a machine think? We are in fact asking, can a machine think like a chef? Here, when I say chef, I mean anyone who is very good, excellent, has a fantastic intuition of how cooking works, and is capable of creating new dishes, variations of the new dishes, if not the new dish altogether. That's what chef means, by the way, here. Well, we started asking this question, and especially in this world where artificial neural networks and a special class of them called transformers have changed things dramatically to make various aspects of AI possible, we started asking this question to create models, language models, to create recipe text using an algorithm that we called as Ratatouille. How many of you, can you raise your hands about how many of you have seen this movie, animation movie called Ratatouille, where a rat is making a venture into the human world, where it wants to not eat the leftovers of the human, but what would like to create new dishes and enjoy and relish it. Thank you for raising the hands. Many of you already seen it, this movie. And this is a beautiful story of how anyone who would want to cook can cook. Well, we wanted to ask this question, can a machine cook? And to simplify it, we were asking, can a machine think like a chef, or can a machine generate a recipe which fools a chef into thinking that it is real? Well, that's a question we were asking, and the URL that is presented to you, you can try it out later, presents, it's a primitive, the first cut of the algorithm that we have created, the Ratatouille algorithm. And the idea behind it was about looking at the scattered knowledge that is available to us of recipes, a large number of recipes. Remember, these are not all million recipes, but little less than that. But this scattered knowledge being structured, and we have a recipe DB where we have created a structured data of recipes, wherein we have identified what part of it is a title. Then you have ingredient phrases, like you have, for example, two small potatoes peeled and chopped. So we have been able to identify what each word or a combination of word mean, which of the words are referring to an ingredient, what refers to quantity, unit, processing, etc., cooking utensil, cooking protocol, etc. And this structured data was further fine-tuned using language models, including large language models, and to build generative algorithms. ChatGPT is, by the way, generative algorithm. So what we have created essentially is a ChatGPT for recipes. And having created these recipes, we wanted to evaluate them. And the way to evaluate them is, one of the ways to evaluate rather, is by using what is known as the Turing test. Many of us already are acquainted with the Turing test, why we do not know the exact terminology used in the computer science for the same. When you use Google for asking questions through voice, it's a Turing test. You can converse with Alexa in a manner as you are talking to another human being. That's a classic pass, or that's the way Alexa passes the classic Turing test, as long as it doesn't make you seem there is a machine or an algorithm behind it which is talking to you, but you can almost imagine it to be a human being. So we created an equivalent of Turing test for chefs. The idea was that you have a stack of real recipes. We had 118,000 recipes from across the world cuisines. And you have another stack of recipes which are generated by Ratatouille algorithm. And this was a framework where chefs on invitation would log in and declare themselves by their names, their expertise in terms of are they amateur, experts, or professionals. And then we shall be presenting in a randomized fashion one of the recipes from the stack of recipes that we have. And they have to make a judgment after only reading the recipe about, is it fake or real? If, as a chef, with their intuition, culinary intuition, if they are able to judge by looking at some trivial or serious mistake that is being made there, that it is a fake recipe, then it's a win for a human, a chef. Whereas at the same time, if a computer generated recipe is presented and if it looks almost flawless, where a chef is declaring it to be a real recipe, then turns out that it's a win for the computer. And that's the way we counted this, and we ended up getting these scores. This experiment incidentally was done in collaboration with Institute of Hotel Management, which is the equivalent of IITs in the culinary space. And these were students who are in the final years who have already gotten a job. So they are experts in a way, along with some of the faculties who evaluated our recipes. And the Turing test for chef returned a result of around 69.88%, which is an F1 score, as it is called, that we on which it was evaluated. And that way, we barely passed, the algorithm barely passed the Turing test. Quite clearly, there is a lot of scope for improvising these algorithms by using reinforcement learning, by making the algorithm learn from the mistakes that it is doing in a repeated fashion. And this is a proposition that we are presenting. In fact, this paper will be available on Monday by evening. And this is a proposal about how we can use AI computing for capturing culinary creativity and create new recipes. Notice that the moment I say new recipes are not to be created only for the purpose of taste. They are also meant to be created for creating nutritious recipes, potentially healthy recipes which can help us in the long run, which are targeted towards specific disorders such as cardiovascular disorders or type 2 diabetes, etc. We can create recipes which are within a certain constraint. Some of us might have allergies and we might want to avoid certain ingredients, or we might want to hit up a certain calorific value based on our body mass index, or some of us who are adventurous might want to create recipes which are within a certain carbon footprint such that it doesn't affect the environment much. Regardless of what is the objective with which we would like to create new recipes, our algorithms can actually help us achieving that direction, help us moving in that direction. And this is the vision that was portrayed in this article, where one talked about how AI can transform gastronomy and the food space in general. Well, that's the story of how artificial intelligence is making inroads into something as sensorily difficult and complex as that of cooking and food. Towards the end of it, I would like to give a glimpse of certain applications and how we are using the modern tools of computer science, such as machine learning, other than the umbrella term artificial intelligence, for understanding different aspects of food. Couple of aspects that I would present, which are critical if we really want to make a recipe which is accepted by the population, is the taste and the health. So both of these need to be accounted for, is what we are proposing. And one of the ways to do that would be to understand the basis, the chemical basis of taste, and perhaps the basis of nutrition and health. So towards the first direction, we believe that we can understand the plethora of molecules that are present in the food ingredients and predict the kind of taste it would have. And before I present that, I think there is one more quick topic I would like to touch upon, is that right now we are taking a data-driven approach for understanding recipes and creating new recipes. But at the same time, we can take an approach which is fundamental, where we believe that the act of cooking, the very idea of cooking, has an underlying grammar behind it, including some of the key terms, the verbs and the nouns and the articles, etc., which are from the culinary domain, can be combined to create a meaningful sentence and interesting paragraphs out of it. So borrowing from Noam Chomsky, who appreciated this thought, there is a generative grammar. The paper, archive paper preprint is at the bottom. You can look up later. We have created a proposition for the same. Well, coming back to the ML and how machine learning can be used in the context of predicting taste, we have built algorithms which, by looking at a chemical structure, will be able to make a prediction about what taste it would have. And this, by the way, is the state-of-the-art algorithm so far available. published in a journal called Scientific Reports. You could look up if you are interested in the details. But the idea is very simple, that predominantly the taste aspect of food has 5 dimensions: sweet, bitter, salty, sour, and umami. If we are able to predict correctly, given a molecule, what kind of taste profile would it have, then we should be able to move into a direction where food can be made to taste the way we wish to have it. And in a similar direction, we have worked on looking at molecules of different gradient of sweetness. Sucrose is on level 1. There are molecules which are 10 times, 100 times, to the extent of 10 million times sweeter than that of the sucrose. And incidentally, the algorithm called sweetbread can be used for identifying molecules which could have a desirable level of sweetness. So this is a couple of ways by which we have figured out how can we categorically decide or predict, given a molecule, what taste it would have, or in a gradient fashion, how sweet, or tomorrow how bitter, and how much umaminess it has, is something that we can predict using similar approaches. On the health part, well, it's very complex, and most of us are aware of the complexities of food and health associations, because we keep hearing about the contradictory assertions that are made by the experts, scientists, and nutritionists themselves about the goodness or not so goodness about the any given food ingredient, such as egg or other ingredients for that matter. Well, what the approach that we have taken is to look at scientific literature, published literature, which has gone through peer review, and create a text-mined corpus of, right now we have created 36,000 research articles in which a food ingredient is clearly mentioned, a disease is mentioned specifically, and there is an association between the two, which could be positive or negative. And with that, we can actually come up with ways, incidentally, by which we can potentially come up with recipes which are using these ingredients, and hopefully these recipes can be made to be nutritious and potentially healthy. Although it's a very, very complex topic, and I'm rather simplifying the whole idea, but at the same time, it's not something which cannot be achieved, but has been demonstrated at a study level. So one of the studies, for example, showed that postprandial glucose level, which is post-meal glucose, that is tightly associated with type 2 diabetes, can be predicted based on what food you have consumed, making it personalized. Reason being that despite we two having diabetes at almost the same level, how my body responds versus yours, depending on what we eat, even if we eat exactly the same thing, is very different. And therefore, such nutrition advisories need to be made personalized, is a bygone fact. Scientific evidence has already shown that. And machine learning algorithms can compile a large amount of data, which many people are already doing through the health targeted watches and nutrition apps that are combined with them. And we believe that this is moving in a direction where food can be personalized at the level of taste as well as health. And towards the end, I would like to very quickly rush through and tell you some of the tools and algorithm that we have built. This is a computer vision algorithm which does dish detection. For example, those who would like to keep a log of their diet, it's a diet logging app using an underlying computer vision and image processing algorithm, wherein you can point the mobile on your platter. Right now, we have trained it for the Indian platters with 61 dishes up to, and that's when we can identify what food are you consuming, and ideally we can map it to its nutritional content, thereby personalizing recommendations given to the individuals. Well, we believe that it's not just the tools, the kind I mentioned just now, but also nudging, making people nudging people to eat food in a certain manner, because behavioral psychology is a big factor when it comes to food. Something like food, which can have a habit forming component. So we are also creating games. I'm sure many of you play Wordle. This is an equivalent of Wordle called Foodle, which is about food related words and cooking related words, wherein the idea is to nudge you into eating better eventually. And this is available also as a game to play. Industry has already accepted computational gastronomy is the future, and various industry members, without naming them, have been accepting the new paradigm that has been created by virtue of existence of computational gastronomy, which has taken a painstaking effort from our lab, as well as now the other industry members and the academia has joined hands. And we believe that data-driven delicacies can in reality will become the future of tomorrow. Well, here is a book, a popular science book based on the adventures that I have been putting together, explaining how we started with this whole game of looking at food through the lens of data, and where we have reached today by creating databases, algorithms, tools, and what's the future that we foresee is what I'm going to explain in this popular science book, which should be available sometime towards the end of the first quarter, towards March or April of next year. So look forward to having this book in your hands. All of this has also led to various industry-specific copyrights, potentially patents, which are under pipeline. And there is a startup that our lab has led into, and I'm the founder of this Foodoscope, wherein we are providing the digital building blocks of food via the various components that I've already mentioned. Well, all of this is available for consumption for non-commercial purposes from our lab. You should look up. And we are, of course, trying to create societal value by building a center for sustainable food, which will look up into all of these matters. And of course, I love communicating this and teaching the nuances of computational gastronomy, which so far has been available within the confines of IIIT-Delhi, where I have been teaching this course, computational gastronomy. But very soon it will be available to you next winter. It will be available to you all who would like to take this course on NPTEL. And finally, I would like to note an annual festival or event that we have at IIIT-Delhi, which is a symposium, which looks into different dimensions every year of computational gastronomy. This year, we might be touching upon nutrition and food advisories in addition to the other topics. And you're most welcome to join us sometime in the month of December. The announcement will be made on the IIIT-Delhi and lab website. Please look up for that. So this has been an interesting and a long journey of looking at food and different aspects of food through the lens of data, computation, and tools of computer science. This is a quote from John Thalme Brillat-Savarin, who wrote a book called The Physiology of Taste 200 years back. And he, in fact, coined the term gastronomy. He said in this book that the discovery of a new dish confers more happiness on humanity than the discovery of a new star. While I have not been able to discover new stars or do interesting studies in astrophysics and astronomy, I believe that my path, my journey will take us in a direction where we should be able to discover new dishes, making humanity happier and healthier. So with that, I would like to conclude the talk and take any questions that you would have. And before I close, a very quick announcement that we, for computer science students typically, but in general available for any curious student, we have internship opportunities in the lab. So you're most welcome to apply for the same. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Ganesh, for such insightful talk and making food computable. And I'm sure participants have also enjoyed this computable food. And we have participants across India, and many of entrepreneur from food related startup, they have also joined, and they have also asked question in the chat box. So I would like to request participant to just raise their hand so that we can unmute you. The first question is by Niharika. I would
that this is a question about what difference have I seen in the carbon footprint by consuming foods of different cuisines. I see that. So we in fact started with recipe, dish, broke it down into its ingredients. We took the data that is available, estimated carbon footprint of the ingredients, and it's a little noisy data, but nonetheless, we have the dishes and their carbon footprints from across the world, which includes cuisines. And we have an estimate that, incidentally, certain cuisines are better in terms of having typical low carbon footprint, whereas certain other cuisines, for example, the South American cuisines tend to have higher carbon footprint. And it is not a big surprise if you were to look at their constituent elements, because they tend to have often animal sourced and seafood based ingredients, which very often tend to have high carbon footprint. My request to those who are interested in this, including Niharika Gokte, is to look up a paper that is right now under review, but the preprint is available on archive, where we have provided all the statistics and the figures, including those which answer this question. But thanks for asking that question, Niharika.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Ganesh. Next, there is a question by Shaurya Bhatnagar. Shaurya, can you please unmute your...
I can see the question nonetheless, if I were to take it then.
Yes, Dr. Ganesh, yes.
Yeah, the question says, can there be a distance metric to compute the distance between the recipes, just like we have those for images, text, distribution, and more? Well, anything that can be quantified as a vector in an n-dimensional space, you can have a distance between them. Like in a typical 3D or 2-dimensional coordinate system, if you have 2 points, x1, y1, and x2, y2, you can have a standard Cartesian coordinate, Cartesian distance between the two. And of course, there are higher versions of such distances. So the challenge was, how do you create a vector corresponding to a recipe, Shaurya? So we actually have created vectors for cuisine, to first for recipes and then for cuisines, by quantifying different aspects of recipes, such as ingredients that are going into it, processes such as boil, roast, fry, etc., and utensils that are going into it. And thereby we can today compute the distances between the recipes. And as you can imagine, recipes that are similar, all biryanis, for example, would have a lesser distance between them vis-a-vis that of a biryani and a, let's say, paneer butter masala. So yes, we can actually measure the distances between the recipes. Sure, yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Ganesh. Amit Kaul has raised his hand. So, Amit, can you please unmute yourself and ask question?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for that. Hello, sir. Sir, just a slight bit of background. I was the first employee in Milk Basket, and I had clients like Amul, Mother Dairy, Nestle, Danone, Reckitt Benckiser, ITC, Procter & Gamble, Hindustan Lever, Coca-Cola, Pepsi, Colgate, Palmolive, and all. Sir, question that was for the context. The question is, for medical, like for example, for cancer or for dementia, like you mentioned briefly that there are 2 papers and those are specifically for ingredient requirements for those specific ailments. And I just wanted to interact with you directly also on one-on-one basis for us to be able to, because we have the technology to be able to create food which is based on ingredient requirements, food as a medicine, ingredient requirements. And first, what are the requirements? And then the go-to-market of them. Do we go through food companies or route ourselves through pharma companies, or make it agriculture GTM? So that is a question which I had in mind. I wanted to have a detailed conversation about it.
Sure. So very quick, I'll give answer for the public consumption, and for personal conversation, please reach out to me via the LinkedIn profile where I'm available, and I'll be happy to discuss it further. But to give a quick impression to the audiences about what we are talking about here is that, yes, incidentally, if we have mappings available between the ingredients and scientific evidence telling us about how is it related to specific disorders as per the medical subject headings, the MASH terms, then in principle, not for all diseases, not in a short fashion, but for many of the disorders, especially those involving lifestyle disorders, we should be able to come up with a set of recommendations of ingredients that should or should not be taken. And by using our algorithms, we can come up with a recipe or a food product that can be created by connoisseurs, or could be also created as a food product, and figure out a right go-to-market strategy. But that's a very broad and sketchy answer, Amit, to the question that you're asking, and we'll be more than happy to interact further via one of the social media handles.
The next question, I think Parth Gupte would like to ask. Parth, can you please unmute yourself?
Hello, am I audible?
Yes,
Hi,
Parth.
Parth.
Yes,
Yeah.
please go ahead.
Hello, good evening, sir. Nice to see you after a while. So my question was, what are the models that you've used for Ratatouille, and how have you trained them?
Right. So the very first and the simplest of the models that we have used are LSTMs, bidirectional LSTMs, followed by GPT-2 when we published this paper way back in 2022. And right now the implementation that is available on the website is using this slightly old models only. However, we have gone ahead and have implemented the llamas and the Geminis, etc., those which are freely, openly available, and those which are commercially available. Obviously, we are trying it in a different route because it costs to be able to train that. But that's an answer about what kind of models that are being used in my laboratory. About how do we go about fine tuning? Well, it is by structuring the recipe into its culinary component and feeding that aspect of the component, that this being the recipe title, this is the ingredient, that so this structured information of the recipe was fed and is being fed to the various large language models to give a better example of that. And then we checked to what in which way, with what quality these large language models are able to generate the recipes. But there are two steps to evaluating this. One of them I've already mentioned is to check whether the recipe reads, I repeat, reads flawless. And of course, an expert only can do that job. That's a first way of validating it. The second validation, as the saying goes, the proof is in the pudding. So we have to actually cook the recipes. There is no way out of it but to actually cook it in the laboratory / kitchens. And we are collaborating with IHM Pusa, where we will be taking some of these false positives, true positive recipes that are coming out of the Turing test, cooking them, evaluating them through the sensory panel without telling the experts about which recipe comes from what bundle, and figuring out whether our algorithms are doing a good job or not. That was an extension to what you're asking, Parth, but I hope you got a broad answer to your question.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
All right.
Thank you, Dr. Ganesh. And there will be the last question by Kalpesh. Kalpesh, I request you to please unmute.
Yes, thank you. Am I audible?
Yes.
Yes. Thank you for the talk, sir. This is a new field. Like I'm interested more in gastronomy than computational things. It was very enlightening. Just I wanted to ask one question. I had borrowed your example of ratatouille, and in the last scene, when the supervisor is tasting the specific recipe, that recipe reminds him of something past experience from his childhood. So my question was, perception of taste will also vary with personal experiences for the same taste also. That's my opinion based on some talks with my friends and experience. So have your study and the work you have worked in a very multidimensional way. So have you considered this variable also? That's thank you.
Thanks for asking that question, Kalpesh. As I said in the beginning itself, that food and cooking and the cooked dish is a multi-sensorial experience and personal experience. So that second part is what you are touching upon.
Yes.
And when we started investigating and looking at food from a computational perspective, one of the challenges was that, hey, it's one thing to say that I'm going to encode a recipe and get all its necessary components, let's say of a rasam, okay? But it's another thing because somebody else will say that, hey, my rasam is different from their rasam, or one community has one type of rasam whereas the other community has got other type of rasam. So you might have variations of the same dish coming from a small geography, which might create a problem when it comes to compiling the data. So that point is absolutely valid, the first thing, in terms of cultural variations of the recipes. And the second, when I consume the recipe, how I respond to it could be very different from person to person by virtue of biology in terms of how our taste receptors differ, and by virtue of experiences by which we have imbibed in us about what we like and what we don't like. Quite clearly, somebody who is growing in China would have a different likings vis-a-vis who is growing in India. That's an understood fact by virtue of how we adapt to our food that we consume. So it's a very, very challenging problem. So what we started with doing is what we call as coarse graining. Like a typical physicist does, we have done coarse graining by calling that let's worry about a typical recipe or maybe 5 types of recipes of sambar and rasam and some 90 biryanis, etc. And we shall look into the personalized aspect later. That's the approach we have taken so far. It's a very, very vast and challenging type of problems area that we are looking at right now. However, to answer your question, there are a couple of approaches towards understanding this problem and solving this problem. One is by going towards the molecular correlates of taste, by profiling the individuals to look at what are the SNPs, the single nucleotide polymorphisms as they are called, which will create variations of responses from individual to individual, which are there, by the way. How I react to bitter versus bitter may be different versus how you react to it. So that's one way we can compile the data and build recipes which are so-called personalized. That way, when you go into the restaurant, they might give you a small strip which you put it on a tongue and give it back to them, and they shall go and figure out what kind of recipe is most suitable for you. That's a futuristic vision that I'm portraying. And the second could be, forget about genetics and molecular basis and all. Let's look at you as a person and profiling you, which is, by the way, is very much done. For example, already Google has profiled most of us, and it exactly knows our likings, dislikings, and what we eat, which kind of movies we go for. Netflix already knows that, what kind of books we like. Amazon knows it. So a recommender system can be built by compiling data of individuals and their likings and dislikings. Of course, you need to be provided with initial training data, but in principle, that can be done and is an easy approach as opposed to going by the molecular approach. So these are two ways of solving the problem that you're posing, Kalpesh.
Thank you for sharing this.
Thank you.
And I think there is a last question by Mr. Partsure. Has a study been done on vector distances between multiple recipes from same cuisine and behavioral patterns of people consuming those? Maybe cultures owing those. He asked that.
Okay, so the first part is not done yet in my lab. Sorry, the other way around. The connecting it with the behavioral patterns is what we have not done. Finding vector distances between the recipes, vector distance between the cuisines is something that we have already done. But getting that behavioral pattern data from a large number of people is again another level of challenge, and we have not handled it so far. And there are organizations which are cloud kitchen organizations who might have better data to deal with that incidentally, and we don't have wherewithals to get access to that data as of now. But that's a very good thought that you are projecting here, Mr. Parchure, or I don't know who is it, but yeah, Parchure.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Ganesh. I think there are 2-3 questions left, but we request participant to please write to Dr. Ganesh. I think, can you please project the last slide where your email ID is mentioned?
Okay, so that I wonder whether I have it here. 1 second, I'll take
Okay.
it. 1 second, 1 second.
But you can ask question directly to Dr. Ganesh.
Yeah,
And I
you can use my
once
social
again,
identities. Yeah.
yes. And I once again thank Dr. Ganesh for your valuable time and such interesting talk. And for participant, like we'll have this talk online on our YouTube channel by next week. And we have also shared our event page link in the chat box. Please go through it. We host talks from various topics. So please join that. And also there is a feedback form link I have shared in the chat box. Please feel to add your comment. And yes, thanks, Dr. Ganesh, and thank you, audience, for joining this talk.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
sir.